I would definitely tell myself, don't sweat too many things. Just do what you need to do. Don't get caught up in everyday politics of life. Don't get caught up in trying to be like everybody else. Don't get caught up in being upset too much. I would tell my 26-year-old self that keep in mind that there are some things you can change and there are some things you cannot change. The things you can change, do the best you can. The things you cannot change, put them aside and don't let them bother your head. There's just too many other things you got to take care of. And then the last thing I would tell him is, remember, relationships are more important than we like. Too often, I think my academic background and my American background, I always have to prove a point and be right. But my Palauan side always tells me that I have to live in a community with different human beings. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to always tell people they're wrong and to do it this way. You need to develop consensus, trust. You need to develop consistency. And so I would tell them, just go out there and just do the best you can and make sure people know that you work hard and you always do your best for Palau.
Hello everyone, my name is Din Long and welcome to the podcast Lifeline. In this podcast, I will interview people who are having a positive impact in their community and have a strong message that deserves to be shared. We will dive deeper into their journey becoming a change maker, and hopefully you can take away some insights for your own journey. And please do subscribe to Lifeline on YouTube, Apple Podcast, or any platform that you are using. And also you can share this episode with your friends if you like it. It's really what helps me the most. In today's very exciting episode, you will meet Tutii Chilton, who is an educator, sports for development advocate, and storyteller from Palau, which is a small island state in the Pacific that I, to be honest, didn't really know about before meeting Tutii. So this was just an incredible episode to learn more about his story, but also, Palau, what's special about Palau. Anyway, Tutii is very passionate about philosophy and he actually defines himself as a contrarian because he's always reflecting on this question. What if the opposite was true? And his love for philosophy made him become a professor at the Palau Community College for more than 15 years, during which he kept asking his students, what if the opposite was true? What if Palau was self-sufficient? What if Palauan youth were role models for other youths across the world? Or even what if Palau was narrating its own story to the world? At the same time, Tutii has also been engaged with the Olympic Committee of Palau for the last 20 years to develop sports as a means for youth empowerment and for putting Palau on the global map. Because you never know, what if Palau brought back an Olympic gold medal in archery in 2024? So we discuss his long quest bringing his two passions, which are philosophy and sports, together, his long quest finding his purpose to make people think, and his long quest finding his community, which was actually just around the corner in Palau. So enjoy this super cool episode and hope it makes you think. See you soon. So again, Tutii, super happy to have you on Lifeline today. I think we had a great chat already, so I can already say that it's going to be a great episode.
Thank you.
And I think I always start by reminding a bit, like, how do I know the people that I'm having a conversation with? In your case, it's very interesting because it's, I first got to know you indirectly, through Linka and through, I think UNDP in the Pacific. I'm not so sure actually, but you ended up in the agenda of the YECAP dialogue. And then, I think with Linka and everyone, we all love, I think, your storytelling and all the stories that you share. And today, super happy to have you. And I think there's a few things I would love to hear more from, but I'm sure I will get to it. But yeah, I think all your career, I think you always mentioned to us that now, you're working on climate change and including young people, while before you were, focused on teaching and also sports. Would love to know more about Palau, and also last time you told me your daughter was in the Tokyo Olympics. I would love to speak about that as well. I think it's not common, right? So I think so many things to speak about, but maybe just to kickstart, would you like to introduce yourself? Anything that you want to share to kickstart?
Thank you, Lo. Thank you very much for having me here. Well, my name is Tutii Chilton. I'm a Palauan living in Palau now. I'm currently working I used to work for the Palau Energy Administration, and I have an opportunity now to work with island conservation. So island conservation is a totally different mode from what I was doing with the energy. Island conservation, our motto is eradicating invasive species to prevent the extinction. So a lot of the vertebrates, rats, cats, feral pigs, and dogs, those are the kind of stuff that we work on different islands. So it's a different turn from regulating energy sector. And before that, for about 18 years, I was at the college, at Palau Community College as a teacher. And then I had 2 years of academic experience as administrator. And then before that, I was from 1994, and before that, I was in the U.S., just being in the U.S. military from 1986 to 1989. And then going to school in the East Coast. I grew up in New Jersey in the East Coast. So I have a lot of interesting stories from the East Coast, and my love of sports, and just my development in loving being around different people, because the area I lived in was called Piscataway, New Jersey. And there was a lot of different people from many different countries that used to live in that community. I think it was like roughly about 100-some thousand people living in Piscataway. And it was like a mixed group of people. So it kind of looked like the not the traditional, but sort of the ideal American community of many different groups of people living in one community. I did all the traditional American sports, football, American football, not the football, American football. Still my passion. Some of the funny things is, we argue about rugby and American football, but American football has its roots out of rugby. So it's not devoid of it. It's just a different sport nowadays. And so now I've been living in Palau over 25 years. And like you said, I had my oldest daughter finally had the opportunity to represent Palau swimming at the recent Tokyo Games as a swimmer. It's always been her dream to be an Olympian, and she kept working at it, and finally her dream came true. And I'm just happy that she finally achieved one part of her goals, and I'm hoping she'll achieve other parts of her goals. I still have many goals that I want to achieve, but I'm glad my daughter was able to move on. Again, I'm very blessed. My younger daughter is actually in Dubai right now for the World Expo. So she's there representing Palau. Yeah, I wish I could travel to see her, but she was one of 5 young Palauans that are manning the booth at the pavilion in Dubai, and she left October of this year. Yeah, 2 months ago, and she's going to be there to probably April or May. So she's seen so many different people coming in to the pavilion, to the Palau section, but to all the other pavilions. And so she's having such a great experience meeting different people, learning different things. So I'm just happy that living in a small island like Palau, we still have all these different opportunities that my daughters are able to accomplish. I only have 2 daughters. I don't have any sons. So the young man introduced you to earlier is a family friend. And so, I joke about it, but I try to invite, nephews and cousins, sons and daughters to come and hang out because my daughters are already older. They've left the house. So, the young man is here. We were going to play video games earlier, so it's there. But I can't see myself living anywhere else. Like most people, you find yourself in an environment where you just feel like you're part of the ecosystem. You feel like what you do is making an impact. And this is what we kept talking about, these change makers, these influencers, these young men and women around the Asia Pacific region. They're influencing through technology, they're influencing through their deeds, their efforts, and at the same time influencing through their network and connections. And I continue to learn every day from young men and women, whether they're on social media, the young men and women I work with in sports, the people I read about, things that remind me that I'm truly very blessed. I know we always use that word. It's sort of one of those, everybody says #blessed and other stuff, but I'm from a small island. We have 20,000 some people, and I've had these opportunities that have been given to me. Being able to live in the U.S. for over 20 years and getting educated, traveling around the world, coming back home to Palau, having kids, 2 daughters that are doing what they want to do. I mean, there's nothing else that you can kind of complain about. I mean, we all have complaints, but at the end of the day, it's just kind of like, wow, okay, I have to make better effort to make sure that my every interaction with individuals has a better impact, not just with my children, but with everyone I meet. So this is actually a blessing in disguise thing, because you have an audience that I would never ever to talk to. And you've given me this opportunity. So thank you very much. And I know that's a long-winded introduction, but just hopefully it's a reminder. And I always tell my former students that you can influence the world even if you're from a small rock. Bob Marley was from a small rock, just happened to be called Jamaica. And he influenced the world with his music and his philosophies. And each one of us can do the same. It's just a matter of the technology we use and the efforts that we put forward. And if you don't influence the rest of the world and have 1,000 likes, it's fine. You have to influence the people next to you. So I'm very blessed that my 2 daughters hopefully will continue to grow and be great servants of Palau and great benefactors to Palau, so they can help Palau when they go off and learn and bring back things back to Palau, as I have been blessed to bring back to Palau. So we just have to wait and see. Like I said, every day is an interesting day. We just got to keep moving forward and learn from it and see what happens in the future.
It's so interesting, I interview a lot of younger people around their 20s and I always saw me like the reason why I launched Lifeline is to understand how did someone move from, for example, not caring about climate to caring about climate but going the extra mile and trying to impact the community, do things. And the question I always start by asking people, like, can you share a bit about your childhood? Why are you so creative? How does this personality trait come from? And many times they speak about their parents who, they had supportive parents who allowed them to do this and that, or who empowered them to do this and that. And today, I think it's the first time I can ask the other way, the other way around. Like, you speak about your daughters, who are both representing Palau somewhere, which
right.
is, when you think about it, like it's quite amazing. Maybe let's start with, you shared with me the about your daughter who went to Tokyo Olympics. I just wonder, like, how does her dream of being an Olympian come from? Did you have anything to do with that?
Well, as a parent, you always want to say yes, you had something to do with it, but I will have to be very honest. I don't think I had a lot to do with it, but I hope I gave her the environment that she was able to reach for whatever dreams and opportunities that came her way. She was actually the one that came to us when she was about 7 or 8 and says, I want to swim. And so, whatever you want to do, you have a passion for it, I will support you 100%. And I think it's from that every day, making sure she goes to practice, reminding her that it's not just you winning all the time. It's actually the journey and the process of you learning how to overcome your personal weaknesses or your personal obstacles. Because at the end of the day, the time that she swam was like less than 2 minutes. It's like she swam at 50 meters in less than 2 minutes. That was the race and that was done. But that 2 minutes, if you look back from the time she started swimming at 8 years old until she was 20-some years old in the swimming part, then you can see how many years that she had and developed from there. I'm hoping that I gave her the environment and some thoughts that allowed her to make those particular choices. Sometimes we always want to say as parents, like, yes, I had something to do with that. But I wasn't the one there swimming every day. I wasn't the one there going to practice every day. Yes, I woke up, I helped her get up, I drove her to practice. I made sure she had the proper food that I can give her in an environment. I try to remind her every day that it's all about your efforts, how you think, how you interact with people. Don't ever let people talk you down just because you're a woman or at the time as a young lady or as a girl. Because as a human being, you can do so many things. But as soon as you let the environment or the community talk down to you, and unfortunately, there's a lot of young women who are talked down to, and they're told you cannot do this because of whatever belief that community has. You're not supposed to do that because of whatever traditions that community has. Or you're a girl and you cannot do that because of whatever the community or the culture is. I try to tell them, no matter what, you take the steps that needs to be taken so that you can stand up for yourself, because no one else is going to stand up for you. And I think she internalized it to the point where she's really determined. Kids have their own personalities when they're born. So, she's always has a very determined personality. When she gets her mind set on something, she wants to continue until she accomplishes it. And I've always felt that I had to always encourage her to do that, because there's so many obstacles that young women go through. I didn't want to raise my kids to face those obstacles. I wanted to raise them to be prepared for any obstacle that comes their way. They're always going to face whatever issues in the world that they're going to face, whatever discrimination, gender issues. God willing, they're not going to see any violence, but they're going to face some challenges, and we need to stop talking about our kids as their kids and they don't know how to do things. And so I like to think I had something to do with it, but I hope I had the environment. I had created the environment for her to do it on her own. And that's something that I'm hoping that I'm very proud of, because that's what happened to me. My father, Tom Chilton, he's the one that gave me those opportunities to learn on my own. Give me the examples that I need to do to be a man, and how a man behaves, interacts with other human beings. Because of, like you said, my father, my mother, they taught me, and hopefully I gave my daughters the other opportunities, and hopefully they'll continue on. But unfortunately, the world is the world. We are bound by our beliefs and our traditions, and sometimes our beliefs and traditions stop us from incorporating the rest of the world. And I'm very encouraged by a quote by a gentleman from the U.S., Mr. Warren Buffett, and he's like, the reason why and I'm paraphrasing. So he says, the reason why I'm very supportive of gender equality or gender inclusion is that imagine what we've done with only half of the population in terms of growth and development and technology. Imagine if we include the whole population and include women in it. What can we accomplish if we include everyone in looking forward and developing a community, a country, an organization, and not let our personal biases or other biases stop us from working with other people? And just because you're a young man that happened to grow up in France and I have a bias between French people, I'm not going to work with you. That's so limiting, You limit the creativity, you limit the opportunities. And just imagine what would happen if you take Warren Buffett's words and say, if we include the whole world in really dealing with issues of climate change, violence, health, medicine. I mean, I truly believe that, there's a philosophy of duality. So for every positive, there's a negative. And so I really believe that for every problem, there's always a solution, but we need to allow people to learn the true nature of the problem so they come up with the true nature of the solution. So I'm not worried about problems. I'm worried about giving young men and women the opportunity to be able to come up with the solutions. And if you don't include them, and we're very stubborn and I'm 53 years old. So sometimes I'm very stubborn. I think young people don't know anything because they don't have the experience. But they'll amaze you if you learn to just sort of put your own biases aside and say, I need to listen. I need to just listen, and let's just talk stories. What do you think we can do? And it's surprising. They come up with solutions. I was really hoping COP26 was going to have more youth involved. But that's just our own personal issue. So that's, I encourage young men and women that no matter what government does, no matter what organizations do, don't stop being you. Do you, and bring up the voice that you think needs to be brought up. And that's what I hope I gave to my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter that's in Dubai now.
Do you think, because you were a teacher at the Palau Community College, is it, obviously your students are not your kids, but, is it something you try to convey to your students as well?
Yeah, again, there's a beautiful quote from Khalil Gibran. He has a book called The Prophet, and he talks about kids in that book. And he says, kids don't come from us. Kids come through us. And I'm paraphrasing that quote. And students, what is that often quoted thing about it takes a village to raise kids? So yes, even though students were my students at the college, they were still my kids. Because I had responsibility to share with them all the different perspectives that the world has to offer. The very liberal perspective, the very middle perspective, and the very conservative perspective. I have to share with them everything so that they will be able to pick and choose how to argue their point of view. Because I'm very liberal in some things, I'm very conservative in some things, and I'm a very middle ground in some things. And the world is not liberal and conservative. The world is a mixture of everything. And so we need to have our kids be able to learn how to listen and come up with evidence that they can use in their debate. And I like the word argument because it's just a different word of debate. But we need to teach our kids how to, if I'm going to debate with you, it's not just an opinion. You cannot have an opinion anymore. You better come with some examples and facts based on a research. And the traditional research should be that if you can find at least the same information in 5 reputable areas of science or social science, then it's something you can use as a fact. nowadays we're very liberal in our use of the word fact because it's just my opinion. Yeah. Well, how did you base your opinion on? I read this journal. I interviewed this person. I saw this research. Where did it come from? And the important thing that we want to make sure our kids have is just that. So I think for me, when I was working with the young men and women at the college, was just that I go back to I have to make them think. I'm not there to train you how to think. I don't want you to be conservative, liberal, or the middle ground. But I just want you to think. And if you have a certain path that you need to follow, you have to come and have evidence to show for it. And that's something that unfortunately we in my personal experience, young men and women don't really get the opportunity to express themselves. They're always told what to do, and this is how you do it, and because this is how it's supposed to be, because it's always been done that way. We don't embrace flexibility and change because young men and women they're very flexible, and they're ever learning new things. And so one of the things I always question about is, you and I are colleagues. And so I would always ask you for your opinion and your research that you've done in that particular area to help me do my work. But when it comes to education, we force our kids to do things in isolation. You have to do your test by yourself. But all of us teachers and all of us researchers, we have colleagues that we work from and we quote from them. But we force you as a young man and young woman to say, this is just my work that I've studied. It's always interesting to me that if that's what we're doing every day, we train our young men and women to do what we do on an everyday basis. Learn to have collaborative work. Learn to share information. And then come up with an answer and we can share it. I don't know why we can't grade the classroom for a classroom, but I have to give you only one grade. So it's just an interesting little tweak in education. But I hope I help young men and women in the college to do the same thing that I help my daughters do, because at the end of the day, they are young men and women from Palau, where they went to school at Palau, and wherever they go in the world, I want them to be of value to their environment rather than be a burden to their environment. And so what I mean by that is you bring value to whatever relationships you have, whatever country you go, you bring value to that. You don't bring a burden, which means you go there and you use up the resources without contributing to it. And I hope that's what I've done at the college for these young men.
What topic were you teaching?
I was a liberal arts instructor, so my background is social sciences. So I taught a lot of philosophy, history, sociology, psychology, social problems, religion. I taught a class in religion, but I made sure that the religion class was not about the philosophy of religion, but the practice of religion. So we would look at different religions and what they believe and what they practice, rather than I don't believe them, I only believe this part. So general logic was one of my favorite classes. It's a sort of like a thinking class. It's not a straight philosophy class where you study the history of philosophy and the different philosophical points of views from historical figures. But general logic was sort of just, how to think creatively, critically. What is the process to be creative and critical? And the one thing I try to teach my kids was, and I say kids, my students, was, don't ever limit yourself. Don't just say that an answer can only be found here. Look at all the other things around the world and see how they come up with an answer, and see if you can use the technique in biology, or you can use the technique in sports, or you can use a technique in law. So how do they resolve problems, and see how you can use those techniques and try to figure out what problem you have here. And so for me, sports is always been a liberating kind of a topic as well as a practice, because everyone does a sport. Everyone has a sporting culture in their community. It just depends on the sport that they play. But sports plays a very important role in building confidence, not just the physical health of individuals, but the mental health of individuals, and overcoming obstacles. Learning to accept failure is a learning process rather than it's a failure. And, you know, unfortunately, some young men and women, not because of sports, but because of other things, see failure or disconnect from community as a last resort. And unfortunately, they take their lives. And, that's a last resort. And I'm not saying sports will answer all problems, but I like sports as a way to help young men and women to negotiate failure, problems, and then network and connecting with coaches, other athletes, other community members in sports to help you with a network so you don't feel like you're by yourself. We have 6 billion plus people in the world, and unfortunately, some people still feel alone. We're never alone, but we feel lonely. I think it's the better English proper. So there's 6 billion plus people around the world, but I, as an individual, have no connection with others. And that's at the end of the day, that's something we need to really reach out to, because every human life is very valuable, especially young men and young women. I just saw an interesting quote from an American host and actor, Steve Harvey. And he was telling his audience, that a particular guest in the audience, that no matter what problems your mother and father had, God put those two people together to create you. So you're not a mistake. God does not make mistakes. You were created, and there's a purpose for your work. So don't feel like you're alone and you don't have no worth because your parents are not there for you. So it's kind of interesting kind of take on you and I as a human being that actually have a purpose. I was not created just because it was a biological thing. If you have that belief in a spiritual being and a higher power, going back to that perspective of duality, I was created out of thousands of potential human beings, and there's a purpose for me. And now my whole life is finding that purpose. And along the way, if I can help others, like my kids and my students and my community, that's the great journey. And I'm still looking for my purpose. And I think my purpose is now making people think. And you're giving me this opportunity to make people think. This is only a short conversation that we're having today, but I'm hoping that individuals, the words and the experiences that I'm sharing, help them move forward and be able to go and touch other individuals in the work that they do, especially with young men and women. Sorry for rambling on, bro.
No, I love it. And, I have a question around the word purpose. I think for me, it's such a powerful word and concept. And all my guests usually are my guests because they found their purpose. And that's what, keeps them going and makes them, a leader in their community. And some found their purpose at 10 years old, some at 20, some at 30, some later, some, their whole life was a test and trial to find a purpose. They explored different things. So I wonder for you, first, when did you realize you had a purpose? And how did you come up with what you said, that your purpose is to make people think? And was it always a purpose that you had in mind throughout your life?
It's funny, when you're younger, you think you have all the answers. And as you get older, you realize you have no answers. You still have so many questions. And you become humbled by the fact that you don't know too many things. And so I would like to say that I've always known my purpose. And I've always been a communicative person. I like to talk to people. I like to share things with people. I like to be around people. But to be honest, it's taking me, like you said, people have different journeys. And And my journey tends to be based on experience that lasts a long time. So I'm 53 years old, and just in the last recent couple years, let's say the 5 years, that I've really taken this idea of making people think. It was always sort of a catchphrase that I just like to throw around because it just sounds good. But now I kind of understand what it means now as a 53-year-old individual who's lived, half a century, actually more than a half a century. And God willing, I'll have a lot more lives to come by. But just recently, I just it just kind of makes sense now. What does it mean to make people think? There's no longer just the catchphrase that says, hey, if you're thinking about that religion, think about this religion. No, it's not that. It's really make you think about who you are as a human being, as an individual. I think sometimes we have so many conflicts around the world because I'm still trying to prove who I am. And the only way I know how to prove myself is through violence because I have no other words to use. So I have no other evidence to use. So I'm just gonna come and beat you up, and to work with those young men and women who, might find themselves as bullies or being bullied. It's really kind of like the foundation I'm starting to see that the world kind of acts like that. We have bullies around the world that are not individuals, but governments. We have bullies that are not individuals, but organizations. And we have bullies that are institutions, not individuals. And what I mean by bully is they just try to pound their ideas into your head like they're the only one right way to do something. And so for me, as I, let's say the last 5 years, I'm really kind of getting the essence of what I mean by make people think. It's really gets you to accept that your way of life is the best way of life for you in your environment and what you do. And if I can focus my energy on my life and what I can do in my life and how I can affect and work with other people, I have no time to complain about how you do your own life and how you do your own religion and how you do your own culture. Too many times you hear people always complaining that those people they're the kind of people that, but you need to focus on yourself, and I'll use in very general terms, the Christian faith, I'm a Catholic and that's my faith. Sometimes we focus so much on, did you see what Din Long wore to church today? I can't believe he wore that to church today. Do you see him walking with that person? Between my relationship between me and God is, why do I have to worry about you and try to bring you down so I can bring myself up instead of building myself? So I think I'm learning that when I make people think, I'm trying to get them to get to the essence of their individuality, because we're all individuals as part of the whole world and society. But at the same time, the uniqueness and diversity of our individual stories. And you talked about developing stories. You growing up in France and from Vietnam and living in Cambodia now. I was born in Palau, living in the West Coast, living in the East Coast of the U.S., come back to Palau. We have really interesting stories, but those stories allow us, if you actually open up yourself and listen, will give you the purpose. And the purpose is what you contribute to the environment you live in now. You don't have to worry about the bigger world, just your community. What can I give my community that gives them more value? We always talk about climate change and upscaling or giving value to something that can be recycled. And so that's sort of a similar thing that I'm thinking about is how can I give value to the community that I live in and work on building that community with my talent, whatever talent that might be. And the way I found my talent is I just have to figure out what is it that I love to do all the time, that when I do it, time just sort of flies. And I can't believe it took me an hour and I'm already done. Well, once you figure that out, and every person has their own talent, every person has their own love. And then when you connect those two things, the talent and the love, that's where you can find your purpose, and your purpose is how to implement that talent and love So going back to the idea of all of us are born with a purpose, it takes us a journey to figure out, okay, my purpose is to get people to think about their own cultures, their own politics, their own religion, their own way of doing things. And it's very valid. But I think you should learn to practice it and stop worrying about what other people do and try to tell other people what to do. So I may not necessarily agree with the politics that you have, but I am not going to sit around and talk about you and waste my time talking about how bad you are and other stuff. Because literally, that's just a waste of time. Let's just try to make our community as best as possible it can be. Yes, it sounds very naive and one of those kind of, internet, speak self-help stuff. But that's just my purpose. That's just my journey. And I gotta, live out my journey as best I can and see how I influence the people in or around me. And you need to, find your purpose and do your journey and do you like you do in your podcast. That, this is what you love to do. This is the passion you have. I think if we have more passion in what we do rather than the passion of what people should be doing, I think the world should be a little bit better. So we shall see. I still have a lot more years to live, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it very, very interesting because, you said before we started recording that you define yourself as a contrarian. So, always trying to make people think. What if, you do something totally different? Or what if you said, like, instead of turning left, you turn right? I find it very interesting. Maybe I just wonder, maybe it's interesting, like, for example, politics, philosophy, faith.
Mm.
There's so many, movements or etc.
Yeah.
For example, if like when it comes to climate change, and in how do you say Palauan?
Yeah, Palauan. There's a Palauan. Yeah.
Palauan context. Like what, for example, and you worked in the energy administration, you do all these things with climate. What would you say is the best approach to? Because in the end, you or people still try to. I mean, I agree with you in the sense making people guilty is not the best way anyway.
No.
But you worked at the policy level. What is the best approach to? Okay. Top emitting countries, you have to change your lifestyle, you have to stop emitting. Do you think the making people think approach still works there?
It doesn't seem to work in a theoretical process when we talk about the world. Because then now I have to deal with the big countries like the US, you have to deal with China, you have to deal with France, England, Canada. Then you have to deal with those people. And when I say those people, I'm talking about governments, because unfortunately governments are what drives this issue of climate change or this issue of climate crisis that's going on now. And I can't change governments. I can only change individuals. And so again, it sounds maybe too naive, or what some people say is very naivete or something. What's that phrase that they use? But I'm not worried about what China does or what the US does. I'm worried about what I can do in Palau and how I can survive, but not necessarily just survive, but thrive. How do you take those crises? How do you take those obstacles, those challenges, and make them opportunities? Everyone has problems. We all have problems. It's nothing new. But how you respond to those problems, that's the issue for me to think. When I say I like to make people think, I don't want you to think that I don't have problems. I have problems like everyone else has problems, but it's just how I approach it. Right? So when we talk about climate change, again, we live in this gets into an economic argument. And we live in a globalized community where the economy of each country is tied to another country. And their lifestyle and their wealth and resources based on how to make money. It's not about how to help people. It's about how to make money. You know, how do we change the shift of economy to be an economy of enabling and helping people rather than making money? You just have to slowly take one story at a time. And I'm very, what do you call it? I'm positive that it can happen because I've seen it happen in history where individuals have different philosophical ideas. And I'm going to use religion as those philosophical ideas. So there was one Jesus Christ, and we have now 2,000 plus years later. We had one, the first Buddha, and look at how it's happening now. And every religion has had a shift in how people perceive the environment that they live in, and it takes time for it to change. So it's the same thing now when we talk about economy, global influence. How is it that we can just start now and lay down those seeds? There's a friend of mine that likes to use the term seeds of promise. How do you lay down the seeds of promise to yourself and to your community that I'm going to make an effort to not just accept everything as it is. That's what I meant by contrarian. Not just accept everything it is, because you don't always have to follow. You need to just pause and say, is making a right turn the best course? Do I need to speak up because nobody else wants to speak up? Do I need to do an action because nobody else is willing to do an action? How does my individual behavior in the context of whatever I live in going to affect the long-term development of that idea? And I do believe in seeds of promise in this context. If I just focus on Palau and do my best in Palau, the influence will forward. It may not happen in my, not giving up, but just the easy way out. Because I don't want to do the hard work of fighting governments. I don't want to do the hard work of fighting, what is the English phrase, speaking truth to power. You know, maybe I don't want to do those hard work, but maybe those hard work is not necessarily the right way to do it for me. And the right way for me to do it is to deal with individuals, get them to think, give them to have alternative creative thoughts, and let them become prepared for where there's a crisis or a problem. Then they'll have a solution. I have no solution for climate change. We talk about adaptation, mitigation, but how are you going to get the US and China and the big countries to stop emitting? It's basically in their economic DNA to do what they do. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop being the economic powers that they are. So what does that do for us in Palau specifically? We need to be prepared to adapt and be ready with technology, prepare young men and women to have the engineering experience to be able to come up with a solution when the solution needs to be done. And that's like right now, not 20 years from now. But you have to get them to be prepared for that. So I think that's just maybe my personality and my easy way out to say, I just got to focus on Palau and the community that I live in and then slowly build, rather than taking on this big, huge world and yell at the top of my lungs and scream and still nothing happens. I don't want to sound like a negative person, but I don't want to waste my time yelling and screaming and nothing happens. I just want to do my small little part here in Palau and see what happens and do what we do. We talk stories. And maybe there's a young man. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah. Is it something you always believed in, or is it something you realized recently because you tried different things and you were like, okay, I need to focus on Palau?
I think that's it. I've never been afraid to try things, and if they fail, I move on to another, try things, and I think that's the problem with us sometimes as human beings and the cultures that we come from and the environment we live in is we're told not to fail, and when you fail, it's a shame. No, I'm not afraid to fail. We just keep trotting on and seeing what we can do and develop it as we move forward. But it's within the last couple of years that it's been developed that way. So, like I said, I tried so many different things. And then this is just my latest attempt to try to find a solution to a very old problem. And the old problem is, how do you change behavior? And every psychologist, every social scientist, every religion, every government, every institution has tried to answer, this is how you change behavior. And I personally have come to realize that there is not one right way to do it. I just need to learn to understand the environment I'm in, the interaction I have with the environment and the people, and then try to come up with a solution in that environment. Because what works in Palau does not necessarily work in France or the US, but the principles do work. And what I mean by the principles is sometimes we come up with an idea and we publicly say it, but without having a discussion with the community around us. And I believe in like discussing things, in debating things, but on a very kind of a private, personal level. If I can debate people in Palau, of course, if I have an audience that believe what I believe in, that's so great. I got so many likes. That's awesome. But it doesn't change anything because they believe what I believe in. And I need to try to help work with people who don't believe what I believe in, or actually have a totally different perspective than I do. So I need to figure out how to listen to them and say, why do they have a different perspective than I do? And then that's the dialogue that we have. And the dialogue leads to possible discussions that says, hey, you people are really not that way, or Palauans are really not that way. You realize that we're not those bad people. And I realize that they are not those bad people. And we're like, oh, human beings. We're not necessarily human beings. We're human doing. So we need to just continue plodding on. And I believe in just trying to treat as individuals as best I can, respectfully. And I respectfully disagree with you, but I'll be very open about my disagreement. Be very open and debate and talk. And eventually we'll get to that path. Sometimes we set time limits that says it has to be done now. No. Like I told you, I believe in this idea of duality. So we have this climate crisis. It's a problem. I know there's a solution. It's not right now, but there's a solution. And sometimes we need to learn to be patient, to actually sit there and don't say anything and listen. And silence is so powerful. So some of us talk too much. Like I've been doing a lot of talking too much currently. And that's what we do in the media, in social media. We talk too much about problems. Everyone has a solution, and it causes the problems, and the problems become more problems. Sometimes we yes, it's a crisis, but we don't have to move fast. There's no need to move too fast. There's a Palauan phrase that says, if you sometimes go too fast, you also go slow. Yeah. So when you do things really fast, you do it slower because you make mistakes. I think the American story is the rabbit and the hare and the turtle, the tortoise and the hare. I think it's a story about the rabbit running on a race and the turtle beating it because it's not turtle. Tortoise is the one that's on land. So they're racing and the tortoise is just plodding along. And it's an interesting story that says, you don't necessarily have to be the fastest. Just kind of don't be consistent. And the more consistent you become, the more you're seen as actually believing those things. And when people believe in what you do and what you say, the power in the change in behavior is amazing. I don't have an influence of Palau, like what I say, everything goes. But I've been hopefully starting with my kids and starting with my students. These young men and women will be creative thinkers in the future. Not necessarily how I want them to think, but let them be their own creative thinkers, and they'll probably come up with their own solutions. And I'm very hopeful for that.
You told me you were born in Palau, had to move to the US at 6, stayed 20 years there. Why did you come back to Palau? You could have stayed in the US, I guess, but why? Me, I started to really care about Vietnam and wanted to go back there when around my 20s, early 20s. Now I'm 28, I really wanted to live there. So I wonder for you, how was it like, how was your Palau link, throughout your childhood, teenage years, early 20s, and when, okay, I'm moving back to Palau?
That's an interesting question. Thanks. Like we talked about it earlier, you grew up in an environment where the house was Vietnamese, but when you step out the door, it was French. And I also kind of grew up in an environment where the inside the house was Palauan, and I step out of the door and it's an American. And the Northeast is a very interesting place to live because that's where I grew up in New Jersey. I've never grew up in any other place in the U.S., so I can't speak for how they behave and only what you see on TV. The people from this place act that way. But the Northeast is interesting because we're loud, we're open, we think we're the center of the universe. There's no other place in the U.S. but the Northeast. But living in the household that's Palauan, I've always had a connection to Palau. We come home and visit whenever we can. And so I've always visited. I never thought I would live here. As a young teenager, I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to meet different people. But for some reason, it just happened when I graduated from college. And I was telling my mother, I said, Mom, I think I want to join the Peace Corps because I want to travel and because my background is social work and political science. So I said, I want to see if I can put my degree into action. And I think action is a Peace Corps, the U.S. Peace Corps. I want to go to Africa for 2-3 years. I want to go to South America for 2-3 years. If I'm allowed, I want to go to Southeast Asia for 2-3 years. And I'm still young. I'm 21. I think I was 26 when I graduated at the time. So my thoughts were always traveling the world and seeing the world on other people's money. Yeah. So the best way to travel is other people's money. I just got to put my time into the work. But my mother says, why don't you just go home to Palau and see if you can do that? What you want to do as a Peace Corps, or you want to do that outside of the U.S., why don't you just go to Palau and see if you can do that? Just go for 6 months or go for a year and see if you can live back home. Because, you come in to visit, I don't know, maybe different cultures have different ways to welcome you home. But in Palau, when you come home, the first month is always fun because everybody takes care of you and takes you out and shows you everything. And then after a month, then you have to be on your own, So I said, let me just go back and see if I can live there for over 6 months and see what happens. And interesting thing is I came home at 26. And after a month or so, I just felt like I found my place. I knew exactly my place, meaning, knowing your place is not necessarily a bad phrase. What I mean by that is I know I'm from this island, I'm from this clan, I'm from these people, and this is what we do. And Palau is small enough that actually I can physically see the effect I have on young men and women. Where if I did this elsewhere with millions of people rather than tens and thousands of people, maybe the effect will, I don't see the effect. I don't feel like I'm contributing to the overall benefit of the community. And so I said, let me see what happens. And after 3 months, I literally just told my mother, send all my stuff. I am not leaving Palau. That was 1994, and I have not left. And the longer I stay in Palau, the more I feel more comfortable and more confident and more able to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. Yeah, it's a small corner of the world, but great things come from small things. Great oak trees come from small acorns. These are all internet philosophical kind of little phrases that keep you going. So you never know. What are the long-term effects of the work I do in Palau? I can't tell you what that effects will be, but I can tell you that I'm pretty positive that young men and women think differently and be able to approach problems differently. And that's just literally the goal I was thinking about when I said, I want to make you think differently. Or I want to just make you think. Think the way you think, whether you're conservative, whether you're liberal, whatever. Think whatever you want to think in the context of your culture, but how you solve problems, you have to come up with it in a creative manner. That's what I'm hoping that at least the long-lasting value that I can give my community. We always like to think that we give value to our community. I hope that's at the end of the day, the value that I give to my community is I help young men and women think differently and look at problems differently, and they come up with the solutions for the problems that they will face in the future, because I'm trying to learn how to do that now. And this is how I think I can solve these problems now. So it's never been something I ever thought about living in Palau, but now coming back home like you, I just cannot see myself living here. I just feel like I'm a part of the bigger community of Palau, and I feel like I have an effect in Palau, and that effect in Palau helps me influence and affect Micronesia and the Pacific, and then the world itself, because of whatever little things that I do. Hopefully it trickles down. It's so nice to hear little things come up here and there that you said before, and people are kind of repeating, and it's interesting. But repeating what you say is very different than putting it into action. So I haven't yet to see the actual action yet. I've heard people say what I've said, but we'll see what happens. God willing, in the future, it'll come out as positive as I imagine it in my head to be. But in my personal belief, you do the best you can and you put it in God's hands, and then that's all you can do. The American phrase we use is let go and let God. So it's sort of do the best you can, put it out to the universe, and then that's it. You just have to continue to be the best human being you can in the best context that you can find yourself in, and treat everybody as best as possible. That's how I found myself in Palau.
You arrived and you speak about these 3 months. After 3 months, you call your mom, bring all my stuff. Well, what did you actually do during the first 3 months?
The funny thing is I didn't do anything but play and position. I literally just hung out with relatives, reconnecting with relatives. And after the first month, I basically have to kind of, everybody's nice to you for about a month. And then after the month, you have to kind of live on your own and figure out your own way. And it was that learning how am I going to survive in Palau? What am I going to do in Palau? What kind of work am I going to do? That's the kind of thing that allowed me to say, you know what? I've always had this kind of, not an empty feeling, but sort of I've always had to prove myself because I don't belong in that environment. I'm not an American in the true sense that I was born and raised there. I'm an American, meaning I was raised there. I know the culture. I know the people. But I never felt like part of it. It's like when I came back home, it's just, I don't know, it's just sort of a thought in my head. I just feel like I'm a part of something. I feel kind of whole, even though there's problems that come with it. I still feel kind of whole. And so I don't know if that makes sense, feeling whole and complete with all the things around you. I'm still very satisfied. I'm very humbled by the fact that I live in Palau. I get to live in Palau, actually, rather than saying I live in Palau. I get to live in Palau. I get to have the life that I have. It's not the $1 million kind of thing where I have mansions and stuff, but I would never trade it for the world. It's something that I feel very passionate about. Small islands, small things become big things.
And that's when you started teaching, 94?
No, actually I started working at the president's office in the planning and statistics office. I've had many different jobs. I started teaching in 95, 96. I was hired at the college in the recreation department where the dorm students were living, and I was in charge of activities, organizing activities for the dorm students and the students of the college.
Oh, that's nice.
And my hours of working was like, I think it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 10 o'clock at night. And I just got married. My oldest daughter was just born, and I'm learning this schedule. And then, things happen for whatever reason they happen. And an individual in the faculty resigned. And they needed somebody to fill in the role of the liberal arts instructor, the social science instructor. And they knew I had a degree in social work and some background in political science. And he says, "Would you like to teach?" I said, "Sure." My father, Tom Chilton, always told me, it's always best to be prepared for an opportunity that never comes than not be prepared when the opportunity comes. And so I've always been ready to do whatever is asked of me. And they said, "Would you like to teach?" I said, "Sure." I don't have any teaching experience. And I think that was a blessing for me that I didn't have a teaching degree. So I was not stuck in the paradigm of teaching this way. I was trained as a social worker. And in social work, the school I went to was Rutgers University in New Jersey, the School of Social Work. And we were trained that your toolbox should be full of different tools. And depending on the situation and the case you're working on, you pull out a different tool to work that. So if it's counseling, you do counseling. If it's intervention, you do intervention. If it's organizing, you do organizing. If it's policy, you do policy. So it was not just, you just do counseling as part of it. So I kind of brought that philosophy to teaching. So I taught the way I thought kids should learn. And so I just came up with different things within the realm of the curriculum. I didn't go too far away from the curriculum until I got more confident in getting the students to ask questions. But I think it was a blessing in disguise. And I spent 16 years as a teacher before I moved on to different careers. And so from teaching, and then, of course, I've always did sports. We worked with our National Olympic Committee since we began the National Olympic Committee back in 1998. So I've always been involved in sports, specifically wrestling first, weightlifting, table tennis, and currently I'm very involved with archery and sailing, two kind of passions that I've been developing since I've been in Palau. So sports is an idea in Palau. Is we're really focusing on a National Olympic Committee and saying development through sports. So we use sports as sort of like the way to get into the door. And then we work with all the other development issues, whether climate change, education, economy, community development. So sports is the one that everyone has in their communities, and it's sort of a what do you call it? It brings people together. No matter what you do, it always brings people together. And that allows us to have that audience that we can, deal with nutrition, health, social issues. And so that's always been my two kind of path in Palau, education and sports. And I'm still doing sports. I'm doing education differently now. I'm no longer teaching at the college, but I'm still going to the community, and hopefully I'll continue to influence it in that manner. Young men and women in Palau and Micronesia. We shall see what happens.
Are you a sports person before the Olympic Committee?
I actually wrestled for Palau. Yes, I fancy myself as a pretty decent wrestler. But the truth be told is I tried my best, but there's always somebody better than you. But I played sports when I was in the U.S., and I played American football. That's my passion. Wrestling is the second, and now with sailing and archery, I play. I participate, but I'm not a national athlete anymore. My body just cannot handle the work that's needed to be able to, say, wrestle full time or be a full time athlete. I'm more of trying to organize the sports, trying to develop young men and women in sports to be, you never know. One day you might find a Palauan archer shooting in the Olympic Games, and you heard it here first. I hope to be that kind of coach, organizer that will help a Palauan athlete become an Olympic archer and participate in Olympic Games, and literally in a really good tournament, competing against some of the top archers in the world. And we're very blessed that Korea is right next door, Japan is right next door, in terms of Palau locations. And they're some of the best. Koreans are not some of the best. They are probably the best archers out there. I'm sure there's a lot of other people listen to your podcast that disagrees with me, but you just have to. I believe in sports, you have to kind of compete against the best, and so you can see what it takes to be the best. Even if you lose 100 times out of 100, you always know what it takes to be the best, and then you keep learning through experience and practice and technique until you can actually give it to the next generation, or you can actually learn yourself and go out and beat the best. And archery is one of those sports that I felt that you don't need a specific build. You don't have to be 6 foot tall. You don't have to be 200 and some pounds. You don't have to have very fast hands for boxing, or it's a very technical sport. Basically, you and your bow and your arrow. And I think we're all even when we're at the shooting line, that you and I are even. It's just a matter of how long you've been shooting, and are you mentally tough enough to say, I'm not worried about you, I'm just going to worry about me and that target. And the interesting thing about it is you can actually talk about life that way. It's really about me, and the target is my life, and how do I always organize myself in that kind of direction, to be prepared, to be disciplined, to be ready no matter what the situation is. To always remember that there's always somebody better than somewhere around the world. There's always somebody better than I don't care who you are. Even the great Alexander Krelin, the Russian Greco-Roman wrestler, was going for his 4th Olympic gold medal, and he went against the guy from the US and lost 1-0. So there's always somebody better than you around the world. Everybody thought he was going to win his 4th gold medal. He lost it. He lost to literally an unknown guy. I totally, you know what? I don't even know his name now. It's a US wrestler. So there's always somebody better than you. But with sports, it helps you kind of say, okay, you're better than me, but how are you better than me? Are you training 3 hours a day? Okay, I need to train 4 hours or 5 hours a day. Are you using different technique? What technique are you using? Let me see if that technique works for me. How do I tweak that technique? Are you taking mental imagery classes so you can see the arrow hitting the target all the time? Are you taking wind classes so you can kind of feel the wind and you know how many miles per hour it is so you can adjust your arrow to that distance? What is it that you do that makes you so great? And then I try to follow it and make it my own so I can also be great like it. So that's one thing I love about sports, and specifically archery. Whether you're male or female, I believe that we can always shoot the same. We shoot in the same distance anyway, 70 meters. I just don't know why we still have a male and female category in archery when we actually shoot the same distance. But it would be interesting one day in Olympic Games that you actually have a women gold medal in an individual recurve competition. We'll actually shoot against the male gold medal and to see who actually is the best archer in the world, rather than saying the best male archer and the best female archer. It'd be interesting. These are the things I talk about being a contrarian, just making me think, like, why is it not possible? We're literally shooting the same 70 meters. Now,
I think Tokyo had its first mixed
event.
In which, I don't remember which sport.
No, it's archery. It's mixed
Oh, in
event.
archery. Oh.
Yeah. So I think they may have some other mixed events. I think Tokyo was trying to push sort of gender inclusion, and but the mixed event in archery was a male and female shooting against another male and female. So the Palau team was shooting against the Vietnamese team, me and another female, and you and another female. But I'm more interested in saying the women who are the winners of the gold medals should shoot against the men who were in those gold medals to kind of see who is the best male, who is the best team event. It'd be interesting. And the way things are going on in the Olympic movement, it may come sooner than we think because they're doing a mixed event. Some events doesn't need any specific gender that kind of highlights it. So maybe, you know, we can see that one day. I'm hoping to see it one day, but we'll see.
For everyone who's listening, you cannot see him, but coming back to the wrestling and American football, Tutii is very strong. People cannot see that.
Sometimes images can be falsified. So.
And I think it's so interesting, sports, education, and how you link both together. I think that's the super interesting part. I love. You even convinced me to try archery.
Hey, I hope you do try it. I mean, it's when I first saw archery in 2004, I was happy to be on the group for Palau to the games in Athens, Greece. And when I got to the archery venue, and they usually do these kind of ranking events where we all shoot like 72 arrows and whatever your points are. So if you shoot 72 arrows, your high score will be 720 because if you hit 72 times, it'll be 720. And they're doing it at a 70-meter distance, right? And so based on, you know, your score, then the number one will do what they call like a match play. So like maybe you and I will shoot against each other. If you win, you move forward and I lose, right? So when I got there, they were doing the kind of the ranking event. I just saw this whole field of all these archers from every country. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was like 64 archers. I think that's the limit that they can get is 64 archers, right? And I just happened to be there when the men were there. So you see all these, like say 64 men on one side of the field shooting 70 meters. And you know how in basketball or some sports, you find a certain physical characteristic that's always the same in some of those athletes. In archery, there was no individual characteristic. You had tall, short, kind of stocky people, skinny people. I've seen some archers with a little bit of belly. I've seen some archers with no belly, you know. And they shoot really well. And so I'm like, you know, I don't have to be a certain physical person to shoot archery. I just need to practice and learn a technique. And that's really what got into my head, you know. Like, I need to bring it back to Palau because, you know, we're a small country and maybe the best events we can participate in might be individual sports. And archery for me is one of those individual sports that gives us an equal opportunity because it's just all a matter of how I practice, how much I put my effort into it, whether I'm just as good as the best Korean or the best Japanese or the best American or the best whoever. The only difference between them and me is the fact that they are more experienced and they have better practice. So I need to figure that out for myself. So once I felt that way about archery, man, I'm still not the best. I don't shoot very well 70 meters, but I do shoot a lot. We do shoot a lot of barebow in Palau, which is you shoot without the sight. And just the individual competition is so fun, you know. Just imagine you and I shooting 30 meters with 3 arrows each, and we're just talking trash between the two of us, you know, on the shooting line, you know, taking our scores. Like I got a 9, 10, 10, and you got a 8, 9, 9. I still beat you, and you know, we move on. It's fun. I But the other health part about it that I'm learning is we actually walk in the 30 meters. Imagine if we're shooting 10 ends. So an end is 3 arrows, and you shoot 3 arrows or you shoot 6 arrows, and you go and you walk and get your score. So imagine walking 30 meters, there and back is 60 meters, and you do that 10 times. So it's not just, you're pulling the bow, but it's actually a physical thing. Walking is a good thing. So you sneak in the health part while you talk about the competition part, so I hope you do try. Please take some pictures and send them if you actually try archery. I would love to.
I will. Yeah. But so you discovered the sport in Greece it's to like 2004. So like then you come back to Palau and you're like, let's start the archery sport.
Basically, I came back to Palau and I gathered some friends who are also interested in similar things that I'm interested in. We need to start an archery program in Palau. And we got it going, and it's been going slow moving because we don't have we're not experienced, we're isolated. But it's slow moving. So 2004 and now it's 2021. And now we're making the next step. We actually participated in 2019 at the Pacific Games in Samoa. So we do a lot of participation in Palau just to get the organization going. And then we were very fortunate to bring our first 3 male team to Samoa. And we did a lot better than we expected. The first time the 3 guys went off, they went to Vanuatu in 2017. And we were shooting like hunters. So we had a bow that's 50 pounds. And most archers don't pull 50 pounds, because if you pull 50 pounds 72 times, your arm is going to go, and the bows we had were pretty much hunting. So we don't have a sight that can kind of line to 70 meters. So the boys were actually aiming at the trees behind the targets and figuring out, if I go up about 6 inches above the target, it'll land short. So I need to go about 7 inches higher. So we didn't have the real targets. That's 2017. And then the boys came back home and they were so mad at me for sending them out that way without being really prepared, that it forced them to go out and buy the real sights and the real bows. And so we went to Samoa, and 2 years later, and the same archers that shot with them in Vanuatu were so surprised. One of the young men actually shot the round of 72, the ranking one, and he placed number 6 out of 21. So imagine 2 years before, in 2017, and they were shooting 50-pound bows, like hunting bows with thick arrows with sights that cannot reach 70 meters. And then 2 years later, because of their own effort, they trained, then they went on YouTube, we did all these things, and he was able, Edward was able to place number 6 out of overall all the Pacific archer males that were in Samoa. And that's 2 years is a good step for us. And unfortunately, we couldn't go to the Oceanic Championships in 2020 because of COVID. And so we're slowly coming out of it now. But we've been having local events in Palau. And I'm very happy for that. And I'm hoping it's going to continue on next year. We'll have, we're planning 4 events and a national championship for next year. So we'll see what happens. We're able to get some money to buy some equipment. So people are going to be a little bit more competitive now. They see what that level looks like. And, hopefully we'll continue with the drive and interest for that.
So it makes me think of what you said before we recorded, that Tutii means the one who starts things.
I like to think that is just, but it's like kind of beginning or moving or pushing something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what you said. Putting the you said it better than what I'm going to say, but putting your name in action. So you said something like paraphrasing.
Yeah. Well, like I said, that's when we kept talking about purpose and finding your path and the journey that you're on. All these little things kind of pop up and just like, oh yeah. And I like doing that. I've always had a personality like that anyway. I don't like to do what everybody does. I just always have to be different. And I guess this is, you just live up to your name, you know. Everyone has a name. There's a meaning behind each name, whether you're named after your family, named after certain leaders. And, it's sort of like in psychology, we say, what is it? Self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, I think the phrase, I'm using it very loosely here, but it's sort of like, you know, how you can just sort of kind of internalize those meanings and actually behave in those particular manners from there. So I hope I, you know, make my namesake very proud, because I'm actually named after my great-grandfather. And so I hope I make his namesake very proud, and make it synonymous with something good and something new and something creative. That's what I hope to be synonymous with, yeah.
I have a question about Palau. Because you arrived in 94. I told you I watched so many random videos on YouTube about Palau. I read the whole, I read a bit the Wikipedia page. So I just wonder, like, from your own eyes, you must have seen so much change in Palau since 94. Just wonder if you could share with me, you know, like, how has, it's a big question. Even if you ask me for friends, I don't know how to answer, but, you know, how has Palau changed since 94? I've seen a video that was speaking about different waves of tourism, different wave of countries that provided, you know, aid. So I just wonder, you know, what have you observed?
I think because we're using this form of media, we're actually doing a Zoom. So I'm seeing you and you're seeing me, but I'm sure it's only going to be audio on your podcast. So I'll give you only technology changes since 1994. When I first came to Palau, there was no internet. Okay. And I would literally have to write a letter to my mother, who lives in New Jersey, and say, hello, how are you doing? I miss you. And by the way, can I borrow $20? And that letter would be sent, 2 weeks there. And 2 weeks later, the letter will come back and it would say, well, we miss you too very much and we love you, but no, you cannot get $20. So 1994 is what? That's what, 25 years ago? 28 years ago, something like that, right? So I used to have to write a letter to my parents. Now I can go online and email them and get literally a 20-second reply or 20-minute reply or 20-hour reply. It's no longer a whole month letter going there and come back. So internet, social media is by far the biggest change that I've seen in Palau. For example, outside of the example of writing the letter and you and I doing the interview online, and I'm sitting here also in my house and you're sitting in your house, in two different countries, and having this conversation is freaking amazing for technology wise. But just sharing things in Palau with the outside world, you know, I'm not trying to promote any kind of social media app or anything, but I just have to use the example of the Facebook Live allows us to share things in Palau that normally would not be able to share, because then I will have to videotape it, send you the CD, send you the VHS first. I don't know if you know about VHS, and then the CD, and then the MP3 player, and now we have streaming. You know, I'm a fan of streaming. I love movies, so thank goodness we are able to get Netflix in Palau. So, you know, that's the biggest change. But that biggest change is also affecting our society. Our young men and women are stuck. You know, I don't know if you ever seen that picture of like evolution, where human beings are like monkeys. They're like slump over, and they slowly be able to stand up straight, and then they slump over because they're in front of a desk. You know, so the kind of a funny picture of them being on all fours as a primate and then become a human, and then now you're on literally all fours. Your feet is on the ground on a chair and you're typing, right? So now it's kind of it's unfortunate, but because of the smartphone, whatever smartphone you use, I just think we're kind of becoming like less connected human beings and more connected virtual reality beings. So I can text you and you text me, but we don't have a chance to sit down and actually interact face to face. I mean, we're doing it now, but it's virtual. So I think that's the biggest change in Palau. Of course, we have physical changes. We have roads that are paved now rather than dirt roads before. We have boats with 200 horsepower engines rather than 40 horsepower engines or 85 horsepower engines. We have cars from the US, cars from Japan. We're doing renewable energy now, so we have solar on rooftops for individual households. We're finalizing our solar for the country. Hopefully, we'll talk about green hydrogen in the future for Palau to become 100% fossil fuel-free country. So those are all changes, like all other countries have changed. But for me, I feel the social media the most. I feel kind of sad for my young men and women in Palau who are not out playing like I used to play. And I guess it's just different. Just a different society, different community. They rather be online than be in line, you know. So I'm doing my social media, whatever I'm doing, but I don't want to be around people. And I know that's not a factual statement. It's just sort of, I just observe that in young men and women. They're so stuck in their iPhones or their Samsung or whatever they're using as a smartphone that they're so kind of disconnected from the environment. So interestingly enough, there's a Netflix special documentary called Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
It's kind of a scary thing to talk about an IA that kind of correlates all these things that you like and give you what you like at the tip of your finger. So it's kind of like, oh. So I never really knew this until I saw that if I'm typing Google climate change, I'll have a different number one item than you would when you type it from where you're at, because we have two different interests. So I'm like, I thought Google, when you type in, you know, a search engine, you get all the same. No. It's kind of scary that people can be fed what they believe in and what they think it's true. And the internet does it. So I still remember having to go to a library, looking up in the card catalog, the name of the author, and then I look at it and I say, okay, here's the number. So it'll be like M379.20, and I have to take write the letter, and I go to the actual aisle of the library and look for M379.20, and I'll find the book. Now I can just go online and go to Amazon Kindle, type in what I want to read and download it, and it comes to my book, my iPad in Palau, and I don't have to buy anything, and it's all digital. So I actually just bought the whole 5-book series of Dune. I don't know if you ever read that book, Dune, by Strike Herbert. It's an interesting sci-fi, one of the first kind of sci-fi movies about the desert and stories behind the legends and things of that particular cult. I don't want to say too much, since people may want to see the new movie that came out, and I may mess up their spoiler alert. But it's a very interesting book, and there's 5 books that the author wrote, and I was able to download all 5 books into my Kindle. You know, just paying one simple fee or whatever it was, and boom, not instantly, say next 10-15 minutes, I open it on my Kindle and the books are right there, all 5 books. That's freaking amazing. So, you know, Palau is changing that way. And it's good because we have access to a lot of good information, but we also have a lot of access to a lot of bad information. So it's sort of not screened enough for my taste, but when it comes to freedom of information and all the rights that people have. We just have to teach our young men and women to be able to do better research and say, if I'm reading an article from this website, it's not necessarily a very valid website. It's just an opinion. And you need to look at other websites that actually have a history of writing factual information and compare what people say. So,
but it's really linked to what you were telling me, like making people think of something else different, rather than, okay, you Google something, you read article number 1 and you believe it's the absolute truth.
And that article that was given to you as article 1 was not necessarily your choice. It was actually an IA that gave it to you. So that's even more scary, and so it makes you really have to be careful. Like, I'll read article 1 and I'll put it aside and I'll go look for article 2, 3, 4, and 5, just to have comparison so I can see, did article 1 have the same that article 2 to 5 have? Do they say the same thing, or are there different opinions around the world? And if there's different opinions, then I need to research more and go to the quote unquote safe, verifiable sources. If I want to read something about medicine, I go to reputable medical journals to read those research. I listen to reputable medical practitioners or experts rather than everyone underneath the sun. YouTube is a great source, but they're not necessarily 100% experts in everything. TikTok is a great source, but they're not 100% experts in everything. So I'm not going to get my scientific / medical / political economic answers from social media. It's a place where I can start, but I should not end there. I should do other research as best I can. And that's the biggest change right now. I remember not having a phone in Palau. I remember not having a cell phone in Palau. This is 1994. Now I have a cell phone. And everybody calls me from everywhere. And I'm like, I need to get rid of this damn cell phone. And people get mad at you for not answering your cell phone now. That's the funny thing. People never really get mad at you when you call your house and you don't answer. They just know you're not home, right? Now people call you on your cell phone and you don't answer. They get mad at you. Like, why didn't you answer your cell phone? I said, well, when I'm in a bank or I'm in a church or I'm in a meeting, I actually turn my cell phone on silent and I put it away. Because in the bank, I'm waiting online to do what I got to do. I'm in the church to do what I got to do. I don't have time to answer the phone. I do not have to answer it. But I don't know if you ever read that first psychological research called Pavlov's dog, where the scientist would ring a bell, or I think it's a metronome, or let's just say make a noise, and then give the dog food and measure the saliva that comes out, right? And then they do that often enough and long enough that it becomes a habit. And so now they just ring the bell and they don't give them the food and the saliva is already running. Imagine what those dings are, those alerts are on our phones. Have you ever sat there and it rings and it dings and you almost automatically pull your hand out to pick up your phone? That's Pavlov's dogs right there. And I do not want technology to control my life. It does to some extent, but I put it on silent. I put it away. Even in meetings, I don't try to tell people how to live their life because that's their choice, but it's one of my idiosyncrasies. If we're at a meeting, please don't put your phone on silent and put it on top of the table. And then you're constantly looking at it while we're having a meeting. Why don't you just put your phone, put it in your bag, and sit there and have a regular meeting with a notepad or whatever you use. And please don't tell me you're taking notes on your phone. Be engaged in a meeting. That's just one of my idiosyncrasies. My pet peeves. It just bothers me that I do it I look at my phone when I'm talking to you. Imagine me talking to you and I have my phone like this, and this is interesting. That's how much technology has changed our behavior. And again, going back to the original thought of changing behavior. So there was an interesting article about media that I read, and the author will come to me in my head later on. But basically, the paraphrase of the quote is, "We create tools, and thereafter tools create us." And basically, that means that we created the smartphone, and that would become the lapdog of the smartphone, because we literally move whatever beep, notification, and we don't set up boundaries. I don't have to answer my phone all the time, but now everybody thinks you should. In the middle of shopping, in the middle of taking care of your kids, in the middle of a lunch dinner, or not a lunch dinner, in a lunch, you get a phone call, call me between the hours of 8 in the morning and 11, and call me between the hours of 1 and 6. When I go home, I should just go home. But you call me and be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm actually spending time with my family. Yeah. I don't need to be speaking to you right now if you don't mind." But people do mind. And people get upset. And I'm bothered about that. But again, remember, technology, human beings create technology, and thereafter technology creates us as human beings. It's a very interesting thought in terms of changing behaviors.
Yeah. And I guess I don't know if when towards the end of your teaching, if your students already had laptops and phones. But I guess it will have changed as well, the environment in your classroom.
Yeah. Even now, I remember teaching classroom with a overhead projector. Do you remember those things?
Yeah.
A square box with a light, and you have these clear paper plastic that you write on, and you put it on top of that, and it projects it into the wall. Now I use my computer and a PowerPoint. I don't do lectures anymore on the board because literally my handwriting stinks. If I write on the board, you will not know what I wrote. So I prepare PowerPoints. My PowerPoints outline the ideas and thoughts, and then I just talk stories based on ideas and thoughts. And I share the articles that I use for the PowerPoints. So a lot of stuff that I use now is mostly digital. So it's no longer, it's very hard to find young men and women or people in general that have really good writing, cursive writing. No one takes calligraphy anymore kind of style. So when I write, I write very fast. So I may give you the first 2 letters and then there's be a line, and then I have to go back and reread it again and be like, what did I meant to say there? Did I meant to say 3, though? What did I meant to say? And then I read the sentence. Oh, I meant to say the blank. So I have like a TH in a line, But with typing, it's very clear. It's clean. It's clear. So I don't take notes anymore. When I was in school, I try to just type things up. But then I got older and I started reading different articles, and I realized that some researchers say that you don't really process information as much when you type as you do when you write. Somehow writing is a more physical activity that connects the brain and the body together, that you actually process the information before you write it down. And typing becomes sort of like a root kind of behavior. So you just type stuff down. So I'm trying to write things now. But technology is amazing. Technology is great, but it can also be our biggest downfall if we depend on it too much. Because what happens if we don't have any more power to charge our phone? I got to read a book now? I literally pick up a physical book and read it? Oh my goodness. That's such hard work. A lot of my friends in college do a lot of their work on their phones, and it's amazing. I don't know how they can read that small screen. but they do emails, they do all, and I have to use a computer. I try to separate things. But if you don't keep up with the changes will not keep up with you, and you'll be left behind. So there's a way to recognize change and deal with it and accept it or not accept it, but it's going to happen whether you like it or not. And this is the same thing happening now with technology. So either surf the internet or surf the waves on the shore. It's still surfing though. So you just got to go with the wave and see where it takes us to.
Yeah. It's funny how you explain this, and I can really link it with everything you said. I think it's, teaching the kids how to deal with problems, how to be ready for the future is also, I can recognize that when you speak about, the technological changes and actually speaking about problems that will happen. Before we wrap up the interview, I just wanted to ask you, how you were a teacher, and how did you end up, in the energy administration and NDC hub, more like the policy side of climate change? I just wonder, how was the jump from, community college to this?
Well, the jump was not an easy one. There was a 3-year, there's a 3-year period of trying to learn how to be a business person. So I'm sure and your audience will know that teaching is a very theoretical act. We share information. We do our best, especially with liberal arts and social sciences. It's not like auto mechanics where I can talk about how to change a carburetor or do a diagnostic in a computer and then actually go do it in the car. And so most of my work was always in very theoretical in the classroom, talking about what happened if you did a school. And I resigned from the college because I wanted to go and try to start a school. And I spent 3 years trying to learn how to be a business person, which I've never done before. And I was utter failure at trying to be a business person because as an academic, I'm trying to help people, so I don't worry about cost. I don't know how to put cost into the things I sell. I create a lot of good stuff, but I never make money because I don't know how to be a business person. The idea was to have an after-school program, a teaching program that helps young men and women create things. So one of the things that we created at the college was based on a question I asked them based on my research was, what happens if the ships stop coming to Palau? What are the things that we use from ships that we can actually try to create on Palau? And so the kids really came up with the idea of making soap. And we learned how to make soap using coconut oil, lye, and water. And that was the first thing we created and was able to make the soap. And that was the link to what we would call in reconnecting, like the 3 R's for recycling, reuse, and reduce. And we had the 4th R, which is reconnecting. And we wanted to be able to use local products to be able to reconnect to Palau. And making soap seems like the simplest thing to do because everybody uses it. And how can we calculate the carbon that you save if you make it on island than rather getting it shipped to Palau? So those are all the academic stuff that we did. But again, I'm not a business person, so I didn't know what to sell the soap for. People wanted to buy things rather than make things on their own. So 3 years later, I got this opportunity to go to the energy office. And so I took the opportunity because I was not making any money, making soap or other things. And so I took this opportunity to find a new challenge, energy. I don't really know anything about it. And so I spent the last 5 years kind of studying renewable energy, different types of technologies that we have, until now that I have this other opportunity, which is working with the island conservation and eradicating invasive species to prevent extinction is the motto. And so it's interesting, being a young person growing up in the U.S., coming back to Palau, and you find yourself along this path of learning, experiencing, developing career, moving to another career, and then settling in on your last sort of career. So I think this is my third and final change now. So dealing with island conservation and then continue to go back to these ideas of sports, community development, reminding people that there are things in Palau that we can do, and we can do it on our own. The idea of self-sustainability, self-sufficiency, and sustainability Palau. So I was very fortunate with my partners. We created a nonprofit called Lius. Lius is the Palauan word for coconut, and it's spelled Lius. And so we actually created an acronym for Lius. And the L is for learn, and the I is for influence, the U is for understand, and the S is for sustain. And basically, the motto is ideas to life. And how do we continue to make young men and women think, and using that opportunity as a nonprofit to allow us to reconnect to Palau and reconnect to our own communities. How do we become as self-sufficient as possible in a globalized environment? How can we become more of a producer rather than a consumer? I'm trying to address all those individual questions. And then trying to get young men and women to link their economic development and their education at the same time. So it's not just in the classroom learning, but it's actually hands-on learning. And that seems to be what a lot of young men and women in Palau thrive on, is hands-on learning, actually doing and learning at the same time. There are young men and women who thrive in an academic setting, but we also need to try different things. So that's sort of how it led me to where I'm at now. And I guess the last thing is I like just to say is everything's a journey. Do not be afraid of where the journey takes you. Just be prepared for anything and everything, and enjoy it. And make sure you network with people who can support you in your dreams. And if you need somebody to support you in your dreams, feel free to contact me and let me know how I can help you, whatever it can be, using our nonprofit in Palau needs to help us move forward. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily what you take with you when you pass on to the next life. It's what you left behind for individuals to use in your community. And hopefully these are ideas and thoughts that we can drop those seeds of promise and make sure we continue to have ideas and bring them to life. And so that all of us can continue to not just grow and thrive, but also survive in a lifestyle that we choose to have in our everyday life. So I hope everyone in your communities and in your environment are doing well. Unfortunately, during this COVID, this new Omicron variant, please be safe, be careful, and maybe one day you get a chance to come to Palau. Please look me up. Thank you for everything, and Dinlo, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you.
Yeah, I still have well, 3 quick questions, and then I leave you alone.
Okay.
But yeah, that was a good. No, I love all the things, from surviving to thriving, from consumption to production, from burden to adding value. I really love it. I think it adds up very well to, why don't you turn left instead of turning right? It really makes sense, after listening to a preview of your journey. But yeah, like I have 3 last quick questions, just
No
to wrap up
worries,
that I
bro.
ask every guest. The first one is, imagine you can go back in time. So to the Tutii, who is 26, I guess, in 94.
Yes.
Just before you take the flight to Palau, what would you tell the younger Tutii? And also, how long is the flight from New Jersey to Palau?
Oh, that's a good question. If I remember correctly, I think it took me about a day and a half nonstop. So I flew from Newark Airport. I think I went straight to LA to Hawaii, Hawaii to Guam, and Guam to Palau. So Newark to LA, I think is like 5 hours. LA to Hawaii is another 5 to 6 hours. Hawaii to Guam is another 6 hours or so. And then Guam to Palau is about an hour and a half, 2 hour flight, if I remember correctly. I haven't traveled in the last 2 years, so I totally forget these things. So yeah, it was about like a day and a half with all the layovers in between. But what I would tell my 26-year-old self on that day before I get on the flight, based on what I know now, I would definitely tell myself, don't sweat too many things. Just do what you need to do. Don't get caught up in everyday politics of life. Don't get caught up in trying to be like everybody else. Don't get caught up in being upset too much. I would tell my 26-year-old self that keep in mind that there are some things you can change and there are some things you cannot change. The things you can change, do the best you can. The things you cannot change, put them aside and don't let them bother your head. There's just too many other things you got to take care of. And then the last thing I would tell him is, remember, relationships are more important than being right. Too often, I think my academic background and my American background, I always have to prove a point and be right. But my Palauan side always tells me that I have to live in a community with different human beings. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to always tell people they're wrong and to do it this way. You need to develop consensus, trust. You need to develop consistency. And so I would tell them, just go out there and just do the best you can and make sure people know that you work hard and you always do your best for Palau. So that's what I think I would tell him. I don't know if it actually happens or it will happen, but that's what I would like to think will happen. I hope.
No, but at least all the youth will hear that. So I think it's good advice. Good advice. I think it's interesting. Relationships are more important than being right. I think you mentioned it's something you learn growing up. I think when we are young, we want to be right. So it's a very good advice.
Yeah, we always tend to, especially in this contemporary world that we live in, we always tend to always want, like, I love to debate, I love to argue. And it's always led me to say I have to be right all the time. I have to prove all the facts are here. Sometimes facts, once it affects relationships in a small community like Palau, it's very hard to rebuild relationships. And so I think that's what my grandfather was trying to teach me is, you may know a lot of things, but in order to get your in Palau, you need to just be able to listen and learn how things are and slowly work with people in Palau. You don't have to accept everything as what it is, but you just have to know how to negotiate. So it reminds me of my political science teacher back when I was in college. He says, the definition of diplomacy is? And I said, no, what is it? He says, the definition of diplomacy is telling somebody to go to hell and they actually look forward to the trip. That's diplomacy.
And you know, like what you say about Palau, your community, I think it makes me. We had such a good conversation before the recording, but you said
Yeah.
that focusing on what connects us, not what separates us. And I think
Yes.
I found it so interesting. So yeah, I think it's something that everyone should hear as well. And I think another question I always ask is, how do you want people to remember you for and to know you for?
Wow. What do I want people to remember me for? And what was the other part?
Know you for.
Know me for and remember me for. Wow, that's a really interesting question. I've really never. I guess I want people to remember me. I think I want people to remember me as a honest, loyal, hardworking person. I think that's what I want people to remember me by. I may not necessarily be the smartest person, but I want to be the hardest working person. That's what I want to be remembered as. Loyal, honest, and trustworthy. And the other part of that question was again, Daniel?
Yeah, remember and know you for, but I think it's, linked together. Yeah.
Man, I think that's it. It's really hard. I guess it's hard for me to talk about myself in that way because I've been trying my best to just focus on just doing some of the work. And I know I have a bad habit of not doing really good marketing or branding or taking pictures or something. Let's just do the work. But I think I think I think the last part would be the things that I share with people are not just coming out of my brain because I mixed stuff up. I hope they actually go out and research and search what I'm saying and find for themselves their own path. Let me kind of give you the general direction, and then you can go ahead and hopefully help you find your own path and your own research and find it to be true in your context, in your place. So I think that's it.
I have the same question, but for Palau. How do you want people who just listen to your story to know Palau for?
Oh, wow. What I'm hoping that they get to know Palau based on what I've been sharing as a place that, it sounds interesting. I really would love to go and visit. Sounds like a small community that can have the possibilities. I wonder what's there. What's in the water, not just the ocean water, but what are they drinking over there that I need to go and find out more? That's what I'm and let people come up and make their own judgments for themselves based on not necessarily what just they read or hear from me, but I hope they can come and visit Palau one day. We're a small community, small island of 20,000 some people. But good things, I think, come in small packages is what I try to believe in. And hopefully you can come and visit us one day. Yeah, that's what I like for people to think about Palau. Yeah.
Cool. Random fact, I saw that Japanese was one of the official language.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, not now. It used to be.
Oh.
So currently, the two official languages are English and Palauan. But there are communities in Palau that are very fluent in Japanese. We have Japan was here from like 1914 to like 1947, something like that. So 33 years. We have a very strong Japanese influence in. So a lot of our words that we use to describe certain things are Japanese words. For example, denwa. Denwa is a telephone. That's a Japanese word. Um, so it is one of the languages that is spoken in Palau, but the two official languages are English and Palau.
That's why you were speaking about sashimi just before.
Well, that's the Japanese influence. Our cuisines is a very strong Japanese influence in them. So that's another thing, to come and try our food, seafood, of course, but might be of interest to some people. Taro, coconut is our tree of life in Southeast Asia all the way to the Pacific. So it's our food, drink, our medicine, our clothing. The coconut tree is amazing. That's why I use it as a name for the nonprofit, as well as just an image that some people who know the coconut tree know of its value. It's just an amazing tree that was able to travel from Southeast Asia across the migrating patterns into the Pacific. So people really think that the coconut is actually a Pacific island plant, but it actually came out of Southeast Asia into the Pacific. So it's interesting. Well, just some of those little trivias. I have a lot of useless kind of trivia information I have in my head.
And my real final question, but how can me, Linka, people listening, people in general support you, support your work, support your nonprofit, or help you in any way in your mission?
Number one, I just need your support and network and ideas. And I think, then you have my contact information. So if anyone wants it, it's Tutii Chilton at gmail.com. That's TUTIICHILTON gmail.com. And please feel free to contact me. Currently, I'm just interested in networking with people, coming up with ideas. Eventually, we'll move on to actual practice. So, funding opportunities that are out there, please share, and we can try to apply and see how it works from Palau. But right now, I need more your prayers and your thoughts and support more than anything until we can settle things down and move forward. But please feel free to contact me, and if I could be of any help to anyone, please let me know, and I'll do the best I can. I can't promise I will give you the proper advice, but I do believe that I can help you find the direction that you're looking for and help you find your own solutions to whatever issues that you may have. And then you'll never know. Something will happen later on in the future where I will definitely need your help and support, and I will come up and ask you for that. So I appreciate the thought and question, Long, and appreciate the fact that you're letting me speak to you. And I've taken so much of your time, and I have to apologize for that. But thank you for this opportunity, bro. Thank you.
No, thank you so much to you. Let me apologize too for taking too much of your time as well. But really loved our conversation. And definitely, feel free to message me, Linka, anytime. Yeah. If there is any cool opportunities for Palauan youth, we'll share with you, definitely. And loved our conversation. Very interesting how everything connects together. All the quotes that you have been sharing throughout the conversation. It's very interesting. And I think a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to process, but I think a lot of things that I already take away for myself. I think I really love the sentence, focus on what connects people together rather than that separates. You were sharing, the Pacific waters connect the islands together. It's not something that separates the islands. But loved everything. Thank you so much, Tutii,
Thank you
for coming.
Thank you, Din Long. Thank you to your audience for this opportunity, and please let me know how else I can help you. This is how we help each other, networking, connecting. And so you just gave me a stepping stone to maybe something different in the future. If somebody out there listening can connect us again, I'd be more than happy to come on again and be with you and talk stories some more. That's one of my favorite things to do. So everyone, please be careful, be safe, and thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunities.
Congrats for listening until the end of this episode. Of course, to best support Lifeline, you can share this episode to 2 of your friends and subscribe to the next episodes on any platform. See you next time!